I'm Pat Doris. Welcome to The Story. Tonight, we're going to talk about sustainability and Portland's airport. Now, I know it doesn't seem like those two things go together necessarily. I mean, big jets burning lots of fuel and all that. But we're not talking about the jets tonight. We're going to be focusing on the airport's new terminal and the remarkable work there using sustainable timber. That is our big story tonight. There is a ton of building going on at Portland's airport. It's in the middle of a $2 billion project. And the thought behind the design and the project, the new terminal, I got to say, it's very impressive. And we thought that you should get a look at how hard they and the Yakama Nation have worked together to create an amazing structure with sustainable lumber. Environmental reporter Cale Williams has our story.
This is part of our forest. This has been logged.
Christy Fiender has been around timber her whole life.
When I was a young child, my grandfather, he was the first Native American Yakama-owned logging business.
That's left her with a deep reverence for the woods on the Yakama Reservation in central Washington.
So growing up and having that connection to the forest, even as a young child, you know, most of our people here on this reservation, we utilize this forest, not only for recreation, but a lot for food gathering, foods and medicines.
Fiender now works for Yakama Forest Products.
I am the resource manager. My job is to get the logs to the mill.
And if you haven't seen any of their wood, just wait a few months. Yakama Forest Products was one of a handful of suppliers of the 2.6 million board feet of Douglas fir that went into the roof of the new terminal at Portland International Airport. Vince Granato is the Chief Projects Officer for the Port of Portland.
The whole project really was one about how do we do this differently. It's our one shot at really making a statement here. This is a big project. We know this is going to be around for a 50-year timeline.
And the new terminal will certainly look different from most other airports. Its undulating roof covers some 9 acres. There will be live trees in the concourse and skylights that bring in natural light. But the folks behind the new terminal didn't just want it to look different. They wanted it built different, too.
You might just go out and give me the low bid. We're not doing a low bid here, right? We want to make sure that whatever we are using for this project is sustainable.
The roof is constructed of mass timber, a process where smaller pieces of wood are glued together to form structural beams. It's been touted as a low-carbon alternative to concrete and steel. But of course, wood is only as environmentally friendly as the forest where it's harvested. To know something is truly sustainable, you need to be able to trace your materials all the way back to their source.
So that when we install it, we know where every piece of wood came from. That is not your traditional construction. It hasn't been done before. Certainly not to the scale that we're doing it.
And that meant the folks building the airport, they had to set up a whole new supply chain.
This is a Doug fir product. I'm assuming it's from Elk Creek Forest Products.
So they enlisted the help of Sustainable Northwest, a nonprofit that's been working on sustainable forestry for decades.
We all care about forests.
Paul Vanderford is their Green Markets program director.
You build a connection between big buildings like the airport and forests through relationship. You can't do it with certifications and paperwork alone.
He said that timber harvests are often seen as a detriment to forests, but it doesn't have to be that way.
It's very easy because of history to see the harvest of trees as potentially harmful. I think the unique nature of this project is it sees the support of the wood products infrastructure as a critical ally and conservation tool to achieve stewardship.
That emphasis on stewardship led Vanderford to connect the airport with the Skokomish and Coquille Indian tribes and the folks at Yakama Forest Products.
The pride that we have as a people and how we manage our forest goes back to time immemorial.
Finder said they never do clear cuts. Instead, thinning the forest and leaving the healthiest trees behind to flourish.
We don't go for the biggest, best trees. We want to leave the biggest, best trees. We want to leave them so that they can reproduce more trees, you know, for our future generations.
That makes for a more open forest, which is more resilient to wildfire, provides better water retention, and helps with salmon habitat.
So by doing selective logging and opening up our canopies, it provides that sunlight to come down. It provides for our understory to flourish where our foods and medicines grow. It also allows for the snow to pack down in the wintertime and to be able to store water.
As Vanderford put it,
when you are connecting with communities like Yakama, you're getting a lot more than wood.
Yakama Forest Products also runs its own mill.
Yeah, so
where Tyler Martinez Bob works as a sales manager. He said there's a sense of pride among the folks processing the logs into lumber.
We got to go over there when it was being built, and we got to see all of it, and it was really cool to see that they've actually separated and they can actually tell where our wood is versus anybody else's.
Now, the new terminal was originally supposed to open in May, but it's been pushed back due to construction delays. When it does open, though, Granado said he hopes it's a source of pride, both for the people who live here and for those coming for the first time.
Absolutely. We realize we're the front door, we're the first thing they see. Sometimes it's the last thing they see on their way out the door. We want to leave a good impression.
And there'll be signage noting the contributions of people like Christy Fiender. And that, well, that comes with its own sense of pride.
I feel like it's a good thing to be able to let people know that we are still here, that we don't live in teepees, we live in homes, and that we're still contributing to society, in a good way.
Cale joins me now. Wow, such intentionality. That was very impressive. But I got to ask, who's paying for this?
Well, $2.15 billion, somebody's paying. But before you go reaching for your wallet, it's not us. It's not taxpayer funded. So this is being paid for by tenants of the airport. That includes the airlines, the concessions there, folks like that. And there is, in theory, a way that could trickle down into, airline ticket prices.
Right, yeah.
So maybe we're paying for it in some sort of indirect way, but not through our taxes.
Okay, well, it looks like a beautiful project. Is it replicatable? Can it be done elsewhere?
Yeah, that was one of the really interesting things. The way that Paul Vandervoort put it to me is that once you create the wheel, it can be spun many times. They've already set up these relationships with folks like Yakama Forest Products, other small producers that provided lumber for this project, and they're using them for other projects. And Vince Granado, the chief project manager for the Port of Portland, he told me they're getting calls from places like New York and Philadelphia and Boston who are inquiring whether they can do something like this too.
Wow, a lot of people who need to use wood or want to use wood, but also want to have it be have a story like this, have a sustainable story.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not the cheapest option,
Yeah.
but there are a lot of other benefits that come along with this type of thing.
Yeah, I love it. All right, thanks, Cale. Great story.
My pleasure.
Now let's move on to the City of Portland's November election. It's going to be a big one. The city is overhauling its government structure. One of the biggest positions up for grabs, mayor. And all the candidates are talking about homelessness. Our Blair Best has been sitting down with each candidate running for mayor to find out how they plan to address the problem. We previously heard from Mingus Maps, and tonight it's a name you may not be all that familiar with right now, Keith Wilson. He's a local CEO of a trucking business and founder of a nonprofit that helps homeless people. He tells Blair if elected, he plans to end unsheltered homelessness in just 1 year.
The policies and politics from last year are failing.
Mayoral candidate Keith Wilson is a longtime Portlander and CEO of a local trucking business. He also started the nonprofit Shelter Portland. He believes he has what it takes to revitalize what he calls a dying Rose City.
The livability is plummeting, and it has been for many, many years. And that's being shown through all of the businesses that are moving out and the population that is leaving as well. And without us able to really care for our community members in our downtown core, that migration is going to consider. And it's only going to continue to harm our city because as those businesses leave and the community members, they leave and they take all of their jobs with them.
On your campaign website, it says you plan to end homelessness in Portland within your first year as mayor.
Right.
How do you plan to do that?
So on January 1st, the first thing I do is I'm going to promote a public safety emergency. And in so doing, we're going to immediately begin marshaling all of the private-public partnerships, whether it's churches, and as mayor, I'll have access to hundreds of facilities, whether it's community centers, and we'll start bringing that group that I've developed of experts together. Within 30 days, we'll have a plan developed, and then we're going to start standing up nighttime walk-in emergency shelters.
What will make your plan different from what's already been done?
So the plan that I'm proposing is being used not only in communities nearby like Boise, but it's being used in Philadelphia. They have mostly nighttime walk-in emergency shelters. So if there's 4,000 souls in Portland, we're going to need 4,000 beds almost overnight. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean everybody's going to come from outside in, but by doing so, we immediately get to enforce our codes, which are there is no camping, no makeshift shelters.
How do you plan to open, say, 4,000 new shelter beds overnight?
So you bring the community together. As mayor, I'll have access to all of the city assets, whether it's community centers. Blair, we saw it happen just a month ago when we had our severe winter storm, right? We had 4,000 souls living on the street, and we opened up 12 facilities overnight. Each one of the shelters I'm proposing costs zero. They're existing facilities. You just repurpose at night.
Saying it'll cost $0 is somewhat ambitious. I mean, these overnight shelters will have to be staffed at some point.
Yeah, interesting you say that. So the shelter that United Gospel Mission has, that's being housed at the Church of Nazarene, where Shelter Portland's providing financial assistance, $15.55 per night per person. A Safe Rest Village costs $189 per person per night. United Gospel Mission and Church of Nazarene, with Shelter Portland's financial assistance, is sheltering and caring for people tonight at 8% of the cost of what the city is doing.
And how do you plan to approach the people that choose to live outside?
That's their sit-lie law will confirm their behavior. If they want to live on a sidewalk exposed to the elements, that's their right. But by code, they should not be in a tent.
So would you call for no more groups to hand out tents?
I would hope that that would be the case. I will, as mayor, make sure the city's not, and the county shouldn't. I mean, why would we do that?
And you keep talking of ending unsheltered homelessness, but what's to stop say you get 4,000 people off the streets, what's to stop more from following in their footsteps?
Yeah, you know, talking to the mayor of Boise, the former mayor of Boise, he said the same thing. He thought by setting up walk-in emergency shelters, it was going to bring homelessness to the community. And he says, I was completely wrong. By not providing care and allowing camping, brought people to the community. He said it was completely the opposite.
So the city can only do so much in their response to homelessness. You need to also rely on your relationship with the county.
That's right.
How do you, if elected, plan to approach that relationship with the county?
Okay, let's talk about our two different roles. The city is in charge of infrastructure, public safety, and right-of-way. And that's why we're declaring the public safety emergency. We care for our community members because 400 people are going to die this year on the street. That is a public safety emergency. That's the city. The county, they primarily focus on human services, social services, behavioral health. That's what their success is for. So now we're actually in our lanes. And so while during the day we have our day shelters, we're going to heavily rely on the county to do what they do well, which is human services, providing that linkage to drug treatment, behavioral health treatment, and other social services. Chair Jessica Bailey Peterson has been a good friend. She's always been there to help me in my projects, and I've always been there to help her in projects. I don't see that changing at all. I trust her. She's a very sharp person, but she's under pressure.
You've also said you are driven by a love for the community to deliver real change for Portland.
Absolutely.
Is a love for the community really enough to deliver the change that Portland needs?
You know, love is absolutely what I have for the community. And those individuals on the street are my high school classmates. I do the point-in-time count, the Multnomah County homeless census. Last year, I ran into a high school classmate. That's love. I'm not giving up. I'm not helpless. I'm taking action, and I'm asking for every community member in Portland to join in this action because together we can end unsheltered homelessness in a low-cost, flexible, and immediate fashion. That's love.
Blair Best, KGW News.
All right, so that's what Keith Wilson had to say. Blair extended the invite to talk with other candidates as well. She sat down with Commissioner Renee Gonzalez this morning, so keep an eye out for that one in the near future. And she'll sit down with Carmen Rubio, Commissioner Carmen Rubio, next week. They're both running for mayor. If you joined this segment in progress, by the way, or you missed Blair's discussion with Megas Maps earlier this month, you can head to the KGW YouTube page to catch up right now. Well, no, wait till after the show. Up next on the story, the NCAA men's basketball tournament wrapped up today with the Oregon Ducks making a big statement against South Carolina. But with the sports betting industry growing into a national behemoth it is now, how come you can't bet on the outcome of these college games here in Oregon? We'll answer that question with where you actually can, where you can't, and what the gray area is in between when the story returns. Well, the NCAA men's basketball tournament is underway, and today was a huge day for the University of Oregon. They beat South Carolina and advanced to the second round. But this is not a story about the teams. Instead, we're going to talk about sports betting. It's huge business. And for those of you who like to place wagers with the major sports books like DraftKings, you may have noticed that here in Oregon, college sports don't show up. That's because betting on game outcomes for college sports is not allowed in Oregon, not unless you're inside a tribal casino. Outside of those spaces, sorry, nope. But there is a big gray area as well. Some apps or online sports books will allow you to place bets on player stats in the college games. Interesting, huh? Here's the backstory. 5 years ago, the U.S. Supreme Court overturned the federal ban on sports gambling. Oregon was one of many states that quickly got into the game. The Oregon Lottery started offering online sports betting in 2019, first through its own app and now through the popular DraftKings Sports book. It's still a small slice of the lottery's revenue, but it is growing quickly, rising more than 70% from 2022 to 23. But those are for pro sports. The Oregon Lottery does not allow any betting on college games. Retailers cannot offer March Madness brackets, for example, or pools, and the DraftKings app won't let Oregon users place any digital NCAA bets. Not everyone thinks that's a good idea, though, including the former Democratic Senate President, Peter Courtney. He tried to get the lottery to add college sports back in 2022.
This is a major source of funding in the millions of dollars. We don't actually know how much. I'll be honest with you, we don't know how much. The lottery doesn't know how much, but it will be substantial. So I'm asking you to try to think about where we're trying to put the money.
Always passionate, but he didn't get far with this one. His bill died after being criticized from tribal casinos, which did not want the competition.
It is true that tribes, not all tribes, but currently tribes do have the ability to offer NC2AA sports betting through our own sports books. But as you guys know, we are geofenced in offering our product on reservation lands. You also know that we are all located in rural areas and parts of the state, so it's very difficult for us to get these products into the hands of all Oregonians.
So there you have it. By the way, there is no Oregon law that tells the lottery folks they cannot offer college sports betting. That ruling came from the Lottery Commission themselves, the folks who set the rules for the lottery here. Oregon's history with sports betting actually goes all the way back to 1989 when the state lottery launched a program called Sports Action, which would allow you to bet on NFL games. And then the U.S. Congress passed a national ban on sports gambling 3 years later. That's the law that the Supreme Court then struck down in 2018. But the law included an exception for any state already allowed sports gambling. So Oregonians were still able to keep right on betting on pro football games every year until 2007. That's when the legislature told the Lottery Commission to stop. So once again, in Oregon, the current state of online sports gambling on college games is this. You can do it at a tribal casino. You cannot do it through the Oregon Lottery, which partners with DraftKings, and that's why no college sports show up there. But some other sports books allow you to bet on how college players perform, total points, rebounds, steals, that sort of thing. That's the gray area in Oregon, where some of the smaller books operate. Interesting stuff, huh? Coming up next on The Story, our series on the 10th anniversary of the Oso landslide in Washington continues. Tonight, we take a look at the science of America's deadliest landslide to find out why it proved so powerful and how that knowledge can hopefully save lives in the future. The Oso landslide that killed more than 40 people north of Seattle was an awful tragedy 10 years ago this week. But it was far from the first landslide on that hill. We spoke with a geologist who studied the disaster and a reporter who covered the science closely. We wanted to know why this one was so powerful and how we can use what we learned to save lives moving forward. Erica Zucco explains.
We believe this is Steelhead Drive, the street, the community that were demolished by the mudslide.
The idea that we'd have big landslides in Western Washington, that's not a surprise. One that would go that far, that fast, that was a surprise.
When you see something like that, 10 years later, it sticks with me.
My name is David Montgomery, and I'm a professor of geomorphology here at the University of Washington.
I'm Glenn Farley. I'm a retired reporter for King TV.
Where I'm standing now really looks up the throat of the slide.
I was one of the first reporters to work this incident.
I got invited to join in the aftermath of the Oso slide. I had the mission of trying to document what you might think of as ephemeral data, the stuff that is like apparent on the ground right after an event. It was essentially a reactivation of a slide that had failed before, but this time it went further, faster, presumably due to all the rain we had. That was an incredibly wet month.
Add rain, heavy rain this month, double the average, more than 15 inches.
You just dump water on the soil and it soaks in and it soaks in and it soaks in and it soaks in until it's too much. And that, with gravity, you get what you got.
That triggered the debris avalanche. And then the second piece of the hill fell down, essentially rotated or collapsed down into the hole left by that first piece.
And they described it as like an entire row of semis that would have been traveling at that kind of speed, mowing over everything in its path. They had done a series of LiDAR flights over this valley not more than, I think, a few months before the landslide.
LiDAR stands for light detection and ranging, where if you shine a laser down at the topography and you measure how long it takes the light to come back, you can get an incredibly detailed picture of the surface of the Earth out of that.
So one of the things that they knew fairly early was just how much material had been lost out of this hillside, because they could see what it looked like after the slide and they could see what it looked like before the slide.
So we did that for the valley around Oso, and what we came up with were some kind of sobering conclusions in terms of how frequently landslides happened in that segment of the valley. If there's 1 in 200 chance of a big landslide coming down on a place, is that a place for residential structures? Probably not.
Where should we allow neighborhoods to be built? What's the geology around there? All of that stuff can be affected by what they've learned, but they needed to identify where the greatest hazards are.
The Oso slide was a tragedy beyond measure, really. It does put a reminder for everybody in the Pacific Northwest. This is landslide country. We live in an environment that's beautiful. We all enjoy it. The rugged hills, the glacial legacy that shaped the terrain and create a lot of the beauty in the region also has the seeds of danger in it. And in that sense, the Oso event was a terribly unfortunate lesson in just how wrong things can actually go sometimes.
One of the agreements that we struck with the authorities was when they located a body, that all the filming would stop. There would be a whistle, a horn that went off. That happened when we were back in there, and these people didn't have a chance. And that's why we really need to be smart about the geology going forward in this state.
That was Erica Zucco reporting. And that's the end of our show. Thanks so much for watching. But remember, the story, our collective story, that never ends. The good stuff is coming your way next, and I'll see you right back here tomorrow night at 6:30.